Hey-ho, let's go. And a happy Tuesday, everyone. Hope you're well wherever you are. On this beautiful, sunny Albany, New York, Tuesday afternoon. I am Sean Pugsley Martin. This is episode 21 of Pugsley's Pit. And as we always do each week, we begin the show by asking you the question, where else would you rather be than right here, right now? By way of introduction, I'm a freelance sports writer for the Albany Times-Union here in Albany, a sports enthusiast, a big-time homer for my teams without apologies, and can also be found as co-host on M&M Across the Board with my good friends Eric and Ashley each week. You can follow this show on Twitter at Pugsley's Pit and taking the podcast on YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Today's show, I'm bringing in a friend of the program, Mr. Gardner Royce. He's going to hop onto the pit, talk NBA Finals, and a little later in my world, a few thoughts on just the unbelievably horrific decision and dumpster fire that is the Boston Bruins front office. And that pains me to say it because Ken Neely, a big fan of his, but they're a mess. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But before then, less of a mess, the NBA Finals. Oh, you're not a mess either. And that's an awesome shirt, by the way.
Thank you. I figured I got to bring it.
Yeah. So look, we're 1-1, Celtics, Warriors. Two different kind of games. One with a big fourth quarter comeback and for the Celtics, and game two, third period's been a disaster for Boston. They couldn't mount that comeback in game two. But where do you see this thing right now as they head back to Boston?
Well, as we kind of mentioned when you had me on earlier, first off, I think it's been an exciting playoffs, and I think these are the two best teams that we could have gotten for the finals, just in terms of talent, in terms of their trajectory. But other than a couple really exciting quarters, I really want game three to be more exciting because, like you said, it was a great first half in game two. But then to your point about the third quarter, the Celtics just kind of withered away. I mean, I've got it up right now, 35-14. The Warriors outscored them in the third quarter. That just can't happen. So just selfishly as a fan, I hope I have this series going 7. So I hope the remaining 5 games are a little more even, down the stretch.
Yeah, I hope so. I enjoyed the first half the other night. Poole ends it with that 3-pointer, give them a ton of momentum. I think right now Boston's got two problems. I still think they're going to win the series. I think they're going to win it in Frisco in game 7. They have two issues. Number one, they have been blown out in the third period. Not only just these two games, they've struggled in the third period this entire playoff. You're more of an NBA guy than me. When I see teams coming out and struggling after halftime in football, wherever, that tells me the coaches are making great adjustments in the intermission. Is this a coaching thing with Steve Kerr against a rookie, for the Celtics?
I know what you're saying. I don't know, because Ime has been phenomenal at making adjustments throughout this playoffs. This is also the final, so it's taken them a lot of series and adjustments to even get to this point. So it is kind of baffling because the Celtics, while they don't have experience in the NBA Finals, a lot of these guys have plenty of playoff experience, especially Tatum, Brown, Horford, Smart. I mean, these guys have been in big games before, so they understand how important it is to come out of halftime strong. So that's part of it's kind of baffling to me, especially in game 2, where it was a tight first half. There were some calls that were certainly not going Boston's way, so you could be frustrated. But sometimes when you go into a half frustrated, that team will come out on fire. Even if the shots aren't going, the intensity will be there, the energy, all of that. And it just didn't appear that was the thing. And we had talked about this a little earlier. The Warriors' experience in the NBA Finals is a massive advantage for Golden State. And so I just wonder if that's something that hopefully in game 3, Boston can kind of get a little better at. But the Warriors understand how important it is to come out of the half and take a big swing.
Biggest stat that jumped out for me, game 1 versus game 2, Al Horford, 28 minutes, Robert Williams, just 14, Marcus Smart, 25 minutes. They each had 2 points. That can't happen.
Cannot happen.
That can't happen again. I know a lot of them didn't play the fourth quarter. The game was a blowout at that point, but what does Boston have to do? Do you have to come out and go out of your way to get them involved in game 3? Or does it have to happen naturally? But yeah, you can't have your three three of your starters each get one bucket.
No, and what's strange is obviously they come out and they steal game one. So that's part of the thing where we're so reactionary. One game, are the Celtics going to sweep them? And then Golden State dominates the third quarter. Is Golden State going to get a gentleman's sweep? So I think we just need to relax a little, where if you were Boston heading into the NBA Finals against this team and you told them, hey, you're going to steal one of those games, they would take that in a heartbeat. I mean, winning on the road is hard. Obviously, you got to do that in the NBA Finals to win it. But I think they just got to look at the tape from game one and what they did well enough in the first half of game two, because in those 6 quarters, you're right there. It's just, to your point, it's been that tough third quarter. But specifically with getting those players involved, I think you look back at the tape in game one, you see how you got Al Horford involved. I think it's also a testament to the Warriors making some adjustments to say, hey, we're not going to let Al Horford look like Shaquille O'Neal or Ray Allen from beyond the perimeter. But I think that you'll see a concerted effort to get those guys involved.
I thought Boston's biggest advantage in this series was Robert Williams. I know he's not 100%. What do you see from him? Because when he's involved, I don't think the Warriors have anybody that can cover him. And if they try and put Green on him, that's going to free up Horford. How important is it for Boston to exploit that advantage? You have Tatum, you have Brown. The Celtics or the Warriors got Curry, and Klay Thompson still has to get going. But if you're Boston, what would your mindset be heading into Wednesday night?
Well, going back to Robert Williams, I absolutely love watching him play. Each game, he does something that makes me a bigger fan of his, because he's hobbled. That he's not at 100%, but he is giving so much energy, whether he's lunging for balls, he's reaching for rebounds, he's swatting stuff. He's such a high energy and intensity player. And I think, to your point, they absolutely have to get him involved. I mean, he's a key part of this defense, which I think we even talked about this when I was on with you and Ashley a couple weeks ago. This isn't just a good defense. This is a historically great defense, and he's the anchor of that. And so for him to be involved, both on the offensive and defensive end, I think that is one of the Celtics' advantages, and that's something that, to your point, they have to exploit heading into game 3.
Klay Thompson's kind of taking a beating right now because he hasn't gotten going. Is it a case where he's just got the shanks with his shooting, or is Boston D'ing him up and forcing him out of his comfort zone and his rhythm?
Not to diminish what Boston has done defensively, because just like we talked about, they're a great defensive team. They've got good wings to size him up. But throughout his return, you cannot overstate how incredible it is for him to be back and playing big minutes. There have been a lot of games, even earlier in the season before their playoff run, where he didn't look in sync, and he wasn't necessarily playing within the rhythm of the offense. And sometimes Klay Thompson, when he takes these shots, they are not in the rhythm of the offense. And when it's going well, you're like, all right, well, that's Klay Thompson. But when it's not, it sort of seems like a glaring error, because Steve Kerr likes that Spurs beautiful basketball. And when Klay does his own thing, it can kind of take you out of that. But I think the biggest thing with Klay Thompson, and maybe this is going to be proven wrong if the Celtics keep taking advantage of it, is everyone is still terrified of Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson could go 0 for 50, and you're still going to be worried. Yeah, but all he has to do is make 2 shots, and then that dude has a flamethrower. So I think it's a combo probably of both, but I also don't think this is something that we haven't seen before. We've seen Klay sort of struggle throughout this season as he tries to work his way back.
If you're Boston, do you overplay Steph a little bit? You risk giving Thompson some open looks and all that. Curry's going to get his, but if you can shift a guy over in his area, is that possible strategy? Or are you better off maybe letting Curry get his, let him eat, and try and take away everybody else?
I think that's a question that has plagued NBA coaches for at least the last 8 years as they've tried to stop Steph Curry. I think in game 1, they did a pretty good job of that. Obviously, he had that terrific first quarter where he comes out, scores 21 points. But in game 2, Jordan Poole starts getting going. You talked about that 3-pointer that was, certainly the dagger. I think they are a very good team. especially when you have Gary Payton II coming back, and he does so many good things on defense and then provides some spark on offense. I just think it's a tough team to say, hey, Curry is, even if you let Curry try to beat you, they still have Clay who's struggling, but they still have Wiggins who can get some buckets, Looney and Green. And then Green does a lot of the distributing. So that's also hard where like you're going to let Steph score a bunch of points, but Green runs some of that offense, especially in the transition. They're just a tough team to defend. So I don't necessarily know the right answer. And I don't think a lot of NBA coaches have that right answer too.
Well, Draymond Green, okay. He said he was going to come out. Game 2 was going to be different. He came out, was physical, got an early tee. I think he changed the series, but you know, sometimes you get too caught up in the one game. One game does not dictate the whole series. Series starts over on Wednesday night in Game 3. But Green said he was going to come out, add a physical presence. He did. What were your thoughts on him not getting teed up that second time? You know, what I think the problem I have with the whole discussion is, the question is not should he have been ejected from the game. That's not the question. The question is, did he deserve a technical foul for putting his feet on Jaylen Brown? And if so, and I believe he did, then he gets ejected because he picked up a stupid technical early in the game. What are your thoughts on that whole thing? I think he got some star treatment there. I think the refs were afraid to kick him out. Sorry, they were afraid to issue him a technical foul, which would have resulted in a technical. Does that make sense the way I explained it?
I think it makes complete sense, and I completely agree with you because I wish refs had more kind of discretion when calling fouls, just in the sense of there are some times when they seem to just flip a coin and decide this is going to be a physical game, this isn't going to be a physical game. Sometimes it seems like they should maybe be in the fourth quarter, let them play a little bit more, whatever. That's sort of separate to the star treatment conversation. We've seen that with LeBron, with different stars get different whistles. I have an issue with that. That's a conversation for another time. To the technical point, I think just like you said, he had already had a technical. If that normally is called a technical foul, the refs have to call it. I don't believe that it's appropriate, and we are going down a really slippery slope. If when the broadcast brings on Steve Javie, he says, well, yeah, considering that he had already gotten technical and they knew that this one would eject him, that's the right call. What are you talking about?
That's not the right call.
No, absolutely not. I totally agree with you. If it's a technical, it's a technical. And they already give Draymond, and I really like Draymond Green, so this is not coming from someone who doesn't appreciate what Draymond Green does, but they already give him quite a long leash to yell, to berate officials, to yell at other players. And this was one of those situations where it sort of felt like it was on full display when they bring him in as Javie again to say they do consider the fact that this would eject him. No.
So does that mean that there's no limits on what he can do, whether it's a hard foul, an inappropriate foul, an elbow? Because he already has a technical, you're kind of now saying, well, he gets a little more leeway to get away with some garbage play because they don't want to throw a star out of the game.
Yeah, and then I think if something dirtier were to happen, I don't think they would have called that, but maybe because it was, I mean, he left his legs on his feet and then he shoved him. I thought he should have been assessed a technical, and he should have been ejected. So we'll see if it results in him, getting a longer leash in terms of any extracurriculars. I also think that double technical is often kind of silly, where if you're going to call a technical, call it on the instigator. If someone shoves one guy and then the person responds, I definitely think the first guy should get the technical instead of like, oh, it's a wash, both get technicals.
It's like offsetting personal fouls. And football,
yeah, I don't like that. Yeah.
What are you taking up my time for?
But I do agree with you, just to circle back. I think that was a massive play. We've seen it in the past where Draymond gets that early technical and then gets ejected in a game. And of course that can swing the outcome. And it probably should have in this one.
Well, he pretty clearly came out before Game 2 and said the Game 2 is going to be different, right? And then he goes out and does it. He's more physical. And look, that's his game, okay? He's a bit of an agitator. He's a great basketball player. But he does some of those extra things that help lift his team. It might spark him a little bit. little similar to what Dennis Rodman used to do back in the day. Okay, you bring a lot of energy to the team, but if you're careless enough to grab an early technical foul, now you're risking it. And yeah, I take a step further. Let's say he had been gotten a technical number 2 and kicked out of that game. Does that game have a different outcome?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very, very difficult to game out. I mean, we've seen it before in different playoff runs in that 2016 finals where he does get ejected. And the same way that if you took a Marcus Smart out in the second quarter of the Celtics, they'd lose a huge chunk of their team. To your point, Draymond Green came into game 2 saying he had to be better, knowing he had to be better because he is that engine that powers that team. So yeah, I think there's a good chance that it doesn't run away, or they don't run away with that in the third quarter. But again, these are hypotheticals.
Steph Curry, let's project out. Let's say the Warriors win this series. Where do you see Steph Curry's place in history? It got asked on across the M&M across the board. Eric suggested Steph Curry go on Mount Rushmore, top 4 all time. I disagreed. Greatest shooter ever for sure. To me, he's 10, 12, 15 on the ranks. It's hard to rank any of these guys. They're all so good. Where's Steph Curry's place in history today, or even 10 days from now if they get another title?
I agree with you where it's very, very difficult to kind of rank players. And I think the hardest thing is just ranking players across eras. I think that's something that we kind of fall into these traps where they're playing different games. There are a different number of teams. There are a different number of this and all of that. With Steph Curry, I think, yeah, he's the greatest shooter. I think he's much more than a shooter. I mean, he's a superstar. It's not like he just shoots in the same way that Ray Allen was a great shooter. And Allen was a good player, but I think if Steph wins another one, he's not on Rushmore for me, but I think he's around that 10. If he's in your top 10, I think you can make a good argument. If he's right outside the top 10, I can also hear that argument. It's just so hard when the other people who are in that top 10, other than LeBron James, and I don't know where you have Kevin Durant, but they're all done. Their careers are over with. Yeah. So it's hard to kind of compare it that way. But he's absolutely one of the greatest players to ever play.
Yeah, without question. And his shooting, I mean, he has no range. There's no limit.
And I was talking to a friend about this. That pool shot felt similar to this, but Steph will hit shots that feel worth a lot more than the 3 points. I mean, some of his shots when he hits them in a transition where he has no business. He does, but you have no business pulling up in transition. But it feels like it's like a 5-point shot or something like that because it completely changes the trajectory of that quarter.
Is it okay? We're going to Boston for Game 3. I pinned you on the last podcast for a prediction a while ago. Where do you see this going? You've said 7 games. How's it get there? Boston take 2 out of 3 at home. Lose game 6 in San Francisco, and then they play for all the marbles. What do you see here?
I still see it going 7. I mean, because they came out in game 1, they got that was a phenomenal statement to open the NBA Finals. Game 2, I would imagine if you're that Boston team, you're looking at that third quarter and saying, if we don't put up a dud in that third quarter, this is we're having a different conversation about the game. Not that the Warriors still don't win, but to your point, by the fourth quarter, it was kind of done. They were pulling their starters, everything. So I think if you're Boston, you go back, or if you're the Celtics, you go back to Boston saying, we should be able to win at least 1 game here in Boston. But if you're the Warriors, you're saying the same thing. As a selfish NBA fan, I think it still goes 7 because both teams have proven they can beat one another. And up until this point, we really haven't seen one team kind of figure out the other team.
I can't remember it now. I heard Boston's like 8-3 on the road in the playoffs. Does that sound right?
Yeah, they played very, very well on the road, which is kind of, and I don't know. I mean, it must mean because a lot of their series have gone longer, I guess, except for that first one. It means they haven't dominated as much at TD Garden. So, but that's great. You have to be able to win on the road. And I think they're going to go back to a crazed Celtics fan base. So I cannot wait for Wednesday night.
Yeah, I think with the Celtics, the thing I like about them, they have responded to adversity every single time they've faced it in these playoffs. They come out with a dud, a lot of turnovers. They lose a game, Milwaukee against Miami, and they always have come out and responded. That sort of resiliency is hard to match. That's why I like them in Game 3, because they got their doors kicked in the third period the other night. I think they're going to come out with their best performance. We'll see, but Golden State's good enough to take that away. Is there an unsung hero here for either team that if they step up, the other team can't match? Is it Peyton Pritchard? Who do you see? Is it?
Yeah, I think for the Warriors, I was having a conversation with actually my dad about this before the series, but you sort of know what you're going to get from the big threes of each, the Tatum, Brown, Smart, and then the Clay, Steph, and Draymond. But for the Warriors, I think Andrew Wiggins is sort of a big X factor, just his size, his ability to score. He can get some really good rebounds. And I think they've been really good rebounding, which is sort of surprising because they play small. And then I think I'm curious to keep seeing what Gary Payton II does, just because he brings another elite defender to that wing position. But then on the flip side, maybe it's a cop-out because of what he did Game 1, but Al Horford, when he plays really, really well, that Boston team is very hard to beat.
Yeah.
Because when he's playing well, if you get more than 12 points from him or 16 points, then that's great. And most of the time you're ending up in the winning column. So I think you actually started the conversation sort of talking about this. It's going to be important for him to get going. He doesn't have to have, around 30 points, but to get him going will be good. And then Grant Williams defensively needs to be better.
Yeah, it's going back to me thinking the Celtics are going to have a nice Game 3. I come out, I get Horford involved. I get that ball down low. The game will come to Tatum and Brown. Right? They're good enough. They'll find their shots. I think you got to get everything else going, and that makes Tatum and Brown, I think, even better. So you think the series going 7?
I still think the series is going 7. The same way that the Warriors responded after Game 1, I think we'll see a Boston team come back with a lot of energy. Again, the Warriors are good enough to withstand a couple punches and punch back, but I'm going Boston Game 3.
Any shot this thing ends in 5, Boston sweeps at home?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Too much Golden State, eh?
I just think they're too good, and again,
they are good.
I just don't. I don't see them. I don't see them lose 3 straight.
Yeah. The other thing, I go back to Game 3. I think you're going to see a lot of whistles in that game early. Coming off of Game 2 with the Green thing, if the officials let some of that stuff go early, you can't lose control of the game. And I could see it a little, them blowing it a little tight. And that's my one problem with the NBA is what you said before. The referees can dictate the whole flow of a game. Either you're going to let them play or you're not. If it's a foul in the first quarter, it should be a foul in the fourth. I think it's going to be tightly called in Game 3 because they don't want to have guys kicking and all that stuff and until it gets ugly.
On that point, I think what will be interesting, though, also is because, like I said before, I think this Boston crowd is going to potentially play a big factor in this. And if you start calling some weird fouls back and forth, I think the crowd's going to get really into it, and that can rile the players up. It can sometimes be good because you're feeding off the crowd, but if the crowd is going nuts after every whistle, you can get emotions in it, and that's where both of these teams, you got to temper your emotions. Because I think the crowd's going to play a factor as well.
All right. Hey, Gardner, I really appreciate your time.
I love doing this.
People want to follow you on Twitter. You're a great Twitter follow. How can people follow you? You got some good stuff.
Gardner Royce TV, at Gardner Royce TV. I will be tweeting about the NBA Finals today, tomorrow, the next day, next week. So thanks for having me on and hope to chat again soon.
Very good. All right, man. Enjoy your day. Mr. Gardner Royce. Now, we're going to go to my world. Over under on me swearing during this segment. I don't know. They haven't said it yet. It's too high. So yesterday, my Bruins fired Bruce Cassidy, coached 6 years, made the playoffs every year, had a second best winning percentage in hockey during that time. The Bruins did, only second to only Tampa Bay, who has won 2 straight cups and in the mix for a third. 246 and 109 for Bruce Cassidy. Very few coaches have numbers like that. And the ones that do have one-loss numbers like that stay employed. Don Sweeney, the general manager, who in my book is the softest player I've ever seen play in the NHL, wouldn't know a body check to save his life. Terrible on the offensive end. I don't know how he had such a long career as a defenseman. I still can't figure it out. It was a long time ago. It seemed to me that this was a power struggle between Sweeney and Cassidy, and Sweeney won out. And Cam Neely is my man. Cam Neely is my second favorite hockey player ever. Excuse me. Next to Ray Bork, the best power forward to ever play the game. He's been a successful president of the Bruins. He's won a Stanley Cup. So he'll forever be family. But I think Cam Neely blew it here. Don Sweeney's drafting sucks. His history is awful. He has not managed to, they've let some guys get away. Torrey Krug after 2019, that hurt. David Krejci this past year. I don't know if they could have saved Krejci. He wanted to go back and play in Czechoslovakia, and that's fine. But the drafting has been abysmal. And it's convenient to look back and say, well, okay, he screwed up the 2015 draft with 3 straight picks, and you got some players that they passed on. Matthew Barzal's one. There's been fantastic for the amateur, maybe not fantastic, but certainly better than what the Bruins brought in. Again, Don Sweeney has done a crappy job as general manager, and I think this is more a case where Cassidy did a better job with the talent that Sweeney gave him than some people are going to give him credit for. I mean, Eric Holla was the second line center last year, and he ended up having a great year, especially with Hall and Pasternak. And that's not just a case where they're going to make him better. I mean, he had to have some talent too. So the one thing, if you want to bang on Cassidy, and it goes on Sweeney too, is a lot of times the Bruins would bring up some of the kids from Providence and they would struggle. Is that them not fitting the system? Is that on Sweeney because he's getting players that don't fit this coach's system, or is it on Cassidy not getting the younger guys? I don't know the answer to that. But anyway, I think at the end of the day, you have to look at the results. And 245 and 109 is pretty goddamn impressive. And for the Bruins to let Bruce Cassidy go, my bigger problem with it is, does this signal a rebuild? Are they going to go with a younger coach? Are they going to bring in a Barry Trotz or try to? He's won a cup. My problem with it is, does this signal that maybe Patrice Bergeron is going to retire, and that things are going to really dramatically change around Boston? I hope not. I'm thrilled Bergeron wins the Selke Award the other day, and a higher vote than I thought. I think he was actually hurt, especially last year, by people who were a little concerned with awarding him a 5th Selke, the all-time high. I think some voters steer away from that. It's kind of stupid. The logic is stupid. But I think they do sometimes, that they don't want to send the message and say, well, he's the best defensive forward maybe ever if you award him this 5th Selke. So they turned away and sent some votes to Barkov in Florida last year. Not this year. He deserved it. The analytics and the stats bore that out. And he got a massive vote, so I'm thrilled for Bergeron. But again, going back to the Cassidy thing, I'm concerned that this signals that Bergie may retire on us with the big transition that's about to happen. And then you look at the Bruins right now and the mash ward that is their lineup. Brad Marchand's had some surgeries. Charlie McAvoy, Grzelcyk. You got guys that are gonna be off the ice till November and December. We'll see. It's going to be an interesting off season, but I'm not looking forward to it. There's not a lot of optimism. I think the Bruins had a chance here to continue to be a threat and to try and build. I'm not sure what that looks like, but we'll have to wait and see. who they bring in to coach and what the team's going to look like. My problem again is that I have zero faith in the guy making that decision. It is just beyond scary that Don Sweeney is still employed as the National Hockey League general manager, and even scarier, that Bruce Cassidy is unemployed. He's not going to be unemployed for long. I was reading last night a friend of mine, a Twitter friend of mine, saying that get Bruce Cassidy to Philadelphia. They need a coach. They need a lot, but they need a good coach. Yeah, Bruce Cassidy should probably be able to name some jobs, any job he wants. He's going to be highly sought. There's no other way that he won't. So, a real crappy day in Bruins land. And like I said, I love Cam Neely, but wow, what a mind-bogglingly stupid decision to side with Sweeney over Cassidy, and we'll see how it plays out. So, before we leave you, I'll give you our shameless plug of the week. For my book, Dear Liam Manoa, Letters from Daddy. Wrote it, just started writing about 2 years ago about this time as we were coming through the pandemic. And that's it. Oh, and a happy 14th anniversary to my bride. I don't know if she'll ever see the show, but if she does, gotcha. Well, that's going to do it this week, folks. I appreciate your time, and look forward to Game 3 of the NBA Finals on Wednesday evening from the Boston Garden. See how it goes. Hope to see you all next week. Take care now.